Yes, welcome to Accelerate's fireside chat, as we call it, where we have these kind of conversations on entrepreneurship. Today the topic is on kind of entrepreneurship ecosystem or entrepreneurship communities. And I think we invited Mr. Startup Community in Denmark. Jasenko, that's right. So, but you have been part of building the community in Copenhagen area, especially in the tech area. But maybe Jasenko, you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you've been doing the last couple of years and where you're going now.
So right now, originally I'm from Bosnia, and my background is mathematics and finance. I was working for the biggest energy company here, Energy. Until 13, we decided to jump into entrepreneurship, going to Malaysia in Southeast Asia, where we decided to build companies and spread them out through Southeast Asia. Came back to Denmark in August 13, saw that, felt that things were going very, very slow. So that's where I partnered up with a friend, and then we built the Nordic Startup Conference, where we focused on connecting the Nordic ecosystem. And that was kind of the path that propelled me into the CPH for the Win movement. That was kind of starting that at that period. And as it took off, I got more and more involved. And before I knew it, I was on the hook. And since August last year, being in charge of running it and building it and making it. Right now, I actually decided to jump into starting my own startup. So we're 3 guys doing a SaaS startup, and so far we've iterated with test users. We're developing an alpha. We have developed an alpha, and the goal is to have full functioning closed beta by end of the year.
Sure.
So big goals, big visions.
Absolutely. So that's the way to go. Yeah. But could you take us kind of through the whole story of building Copenhagen for the Win? Was that a conscious decision, or was it just something that kind of developed and evolved from the Nordic Startup Conference, or how was it actually kind of set up? So could you take us through the little bit of the story of Copenhagen for the Win?
Yeah, absolutely. So Copenhagen for the Win started by a couple of people meeting. I think it was autumn 13, and uniting to actually find out what can we do to unite the ecosystem here in Copenhagen, because everything was very fragmented. That led up to them inviting about 70 people, one called December Evening, where we had investors, community builders, entrepreneurs, people from the government in to kind of address this issue that we don't have a flag for Copenhagen and Denmark in terms of entrepreneurship, and address this issue. What can we do to make Copenhagen that startup ecosystem that's among top 3 in Europe or world? So that December evening, we created the CPH for Win hashtag, where we kind of democratized it, and then everybody could vote. And CPH FCW became the one we chose. It was announced, and so basically December 13 came through. Then February 14 we had the first town hall, and that was where we decided that these 70 guys should invite 5 people they thought should come at the first gathering, which was the first town hall, took place at the Oslo Stock Exchange. And that's where we actually talked about this movement and really put all the visions about what Copenhagen should be, where it is now. And that's where we had Middeligger from Endomondo, the co-founder from Heroku, and a couple of initiatives presenting, and that's where I actually presented the Nordic Startup Conference for the first time in the community. Then about 12 people, that was the core, decided to lead it on, and the second one took place in June, so that another town hall where we decided, okay, what should the logo be, and we really tried to crowdsource everything. And throughout the summer we actually found out that we needed a full-time driving force, because when you look at other ecosystems such as Stockholm, and other cities around the world, there was one key feature, and that was that they were successful because there was one specific person or group of people that actually led it. So you needed full-time people to actually lead it to success. So they were looking for a full-time one, and decided to offer me the position, and I said yes. So from early August, I went full-time in the community, and that's where we actually started by fundraising. for the purpose of building CPH for the Win as a non-profit foundation, because the overall thought is that it's always by startups for startups. So
Sure.
let's have startups fund and throw in money so that we can actually build something for them, and we split it up so that the most successful ones gave the most money.
Yeah.
And that way you have the pay for it mentality. And so we raised a non-profit foundation. We did over 20 events since August last year. 5 actually big town hall events. So a town hall event is a quarterly gathering for the entire community, and that ranged between 600 to 1,000 people.
Yeah.
And last night we had, I think, about 700 people, 700 to 800 people attending. Then we have monthly VC dinners where we get investors from abroad to come into Denmark, and where we connect them with startups during the day. So they have 6-7 one-on-one meetings, and then in the evening they get connected to the angel environment, to the VC environment, and startups that are a bit early and startups that are a bit too late for them. Overall, they get a good impression, a good network when they're here. Then another point was that we did some angel events where we took the most ambitious, most potential early stage startups, and that's where we had a criteria, minimum 2 people, some traction, a product, etc., and connected them with 10 really good angels who were familiar with the tech scene, had done exits before, and were investing in that scene. And so we were always trying to build different aspects, and the reason why we did the things we did is that we actually were very early on in dialogue with startups. So when I started in August, when we fundraised, we actually also asked them, so what would you like? What are you missing? What is missing in the community? And there were 3 things. So one was access to capital. Then there was talent. Everybody's looking for talent, especially if they get capital. And then the third one was basically learning from each other. So knowledge sharing, and we call them sharing circles. So in this point, we created various sharing groups for CEOs, CTOs, CFOs, etc., for various categories within a startup, so that the CEOs within B2B could share knowledge amongst each other because they were in a similar industry sector and could share knowledge with each other. And this also because in the community you need to talk to like-minded peers, and it's not always easy to be a founder or CEO, especially not a CEO where you have to look like, or always have to have energy, always have to be the one that people think is in charge. So it's not always easy, especially if it's hard to fundraise or a lot of things come up. So basically capital, knowledge sharing, and talent, which were the 3 common things we did. And so far as I know, right now the focus is going to be more towards spreading the story about Copenhagen and Denmark, because we still have a task ahead of us there, because Denmark is still not, well, a little bit now, but not recognized as it should be for all the success stories. Zendesk, Just Eat, and Zendesk IPO'd in New York, seen as an American company, even though the founders are good at spreading the word about Denmark. Yeah. Just Eat is seen as an English company because it's IPO'd in London, but it's basically started in Denmark. People forget that. And
So in your mind, what is kind of why was it at this point this is work? I think that you have been talking about how to build a kind of an ecosystem and the startup community in Copenhagen and Denmark as a whole for that matter, for at least 10-15 years that I've been part of the startup environment. But it was exactly at this point that, well, now it seemed to be triggered, and what kind of really interests me, and why I think that this is actually kind of more interesting than anything that I've seen before is exactly what you were saying. Well, it is run by startups, so it is basically run by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs. So usually, at least in Central Europe, I know this is different in the US, but you have a lot of kind of governmental initiatives and stuff like that trying to build the ecosystem. But here suddenly, at this point in time, it was actually the startups that took the lead on building that. So what is kind of your perception of, well, what made it now that this is functioning, even though that you've been trying this for 10, 15, maybe 20 years?
Mm. Yeah, so I think that there's a recognition that every startup ecosystem or every city has, and every country has its own mechanism. So the first notion is that's that. And the second thing is that I don't think every single formula works in every other city. So for instance, the problem here in Denmark was that the saying is that there was not enough risk-going capital. So we needed to focus on getting the foreign investors here and kind of competing with the local VCs and all that. Whereas if you look at London, capital is there already, so it might be different needs. I think that I don't know the full context of what happened up until now in Copenhagen, but I think that what really make this work is that it started as a grassroots movement. You started by involving people at the earliest stage possible, so they could influence everything from the hashtag to the expression, and you started asking them about everything, so they never thought that they never had anything. They always could influence the movement from a very early stage, and it gives ownership. From that on, we also then approached them when we were funding. Why? Because one, we wanted them to pay it forward, and then secondly, we also wanted them to really influence it. And if they're committed with some capital, they'll also probably be more committed to give their employees and have them attend certain things, because that's usually how it goes.
Sure.
So you have something that commits, then you're more likely to actually invest, because okay, we spent 5,000 on it, okay, let's at least try to get something out of it, something like that. But I think a really core thing is that the decisive factor for us was that we involved people from the earliest stage possible. Everybody could influence it, everybody could have something to say, without us sitting 12 people thinking about a concept and then trying to fit it on the city of Copenhagen and then trying to tell everybody what to do. Then it was more bottom up. And I think that so far proven to work, and especially also when you think about it from a long-term perspective, you really need to get the core right for it to be sustainable and to run continuously.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, and in my perspective, it's also a little bit to say, well, at this point in time, we actually reached a little bit of a critical mass in Copenhagen, especially within the tech. Mm-hmm. So you have this kind of situation and say, well, now we have at least a couple of successes. We had someone actually coming along, so suddenly you had a little bit of a critical mass of people who say, well, we have young startups, we have kind of successful startups, but we have also kind of people willing to reinvest back to the community. And I think that at least kind of from my perspective, this is what has been changing a little bit in Denmark. Of course, we have got business angels and stuff like that in Denmark for numerous of years, but usually not traditional entrepreneurs like you see in US. So build a company, being successful, and now kind of re-engaging into the community. So we also have a kind of what I would call a new generation of startups and founders and stuff like that basically have this mindset of how do we get back to the community, and of course to some extent from their own benefit, but also largely, as you're saying, that well, for the greater benefit of actually the community.
Yeah, I think if you look at it, I think there are two movements: the macro and the micro. So, macro movement, that the Silicon Valley really took off. Mm-hmm. There was a notion that startups, entrepreneurship, all that was paying through. Yes, there was the bubble in 2000 and all that, but ever since then, it started to accumulate. Everybody's talking to entrepreneurship, talking about that, and then that's on a global level. And then as Silicon Valley shown successes, you also had it that Denmark shown their own. So what was the first I could think about? It was UB, and then you had Skype, but then you had Reboot, the event Thomas did here to really unite it, and then more and more successes came out. Then we all of a sudden heard about Just Eat. Then we heard about Success Factors with Lars, who sold it to SAP. And then all of a sudden they started accumulating, like Milestone Systems, which is sold from Canon, and all that. And that really, really took off. And then people like, okay, something can actually come from Denmark. We can actually do something. And that's only focusing on tech. Then you also have bed tech, clean tech, biotech, and all that. But if you really look at tech, that's what really took off. And our goal was really also like to emphasize the success stories. Mm-hmm. So for instance, if you look at a town hall that took place last night, it's about emphasizing the successful stories. And it's also why I did Nordic Startup Conference, because I was missing like that go to a place where I can hear about the stories that actually took off, about how people did it, and especially how they approached it. Yeah. So I think that has really paved the way, together with also universities becoming more active in it, like for instance, say Copenhagen Business School, the Copenhagen School of Entrepreneurship, trying to facilitate something there, and that's also like a student incubator which is highly ranked in the world.
Exactly.
And all these things popping through, like the Danish Business Authority allocating money to it, you guys having the accelerator, we have Startup Bootcamp opening, Startup Bootcamp mobile here, and all of these things at the same time. And all of a sudden now, then you also have Rainmaking Loft taking place, whereas before, I think when I look at it like 1.5, 2 years ago, there was only one co-working space. It was Founders House. And they've even grown in size. And besides that, then you have Rocket Lab. So all this explosion in co-working spaces, in the success stories, in this vibe, in universities, innovation, with that global microtrend, has paved the way so that we actually had a foundation to play with.
Exactly.
And could shape it so we could build it.
Exactly. And how do you then find the balance to say, well, a really, really strong community is, as you say, kind of like, it's the 1,000 flowers that flourishes on the field, like the Rainmaking Loft, the Founders House, kind of Copenhagen School of Entrepreneurship, and all these kind of initiatives kind of blooming by themselves. And then the balance between, say, well, and on the other hand, of course, we want something that is a little bit organized. We want a driver. We want a kind of stuff. So how do you build? And of course, in the long term, and this is probably what you experience in some of the really well-functioning ecosystem, that you come to a point where it's not organized by anyone, but it's just kind of blooming by itself. Mm-hmm. But here I think that you were part of at a certain point in time, you need someone to drive it. So how do you find the balance between, well, there needs to be a place for the 1,000 flowers, but we also need a driver?
That's, well, how we approached it is that, okay, we wanted to we could see a lot of things were going on, but they were very dispersed. So we wanted to create some sort of direction for the community without actually being the decider of it. So the first thing was that when we created the hashtag, when we started the movement, we involved everybody, so we crowdsourced feedback. So it increased the chances of actually being sustainable in the long run. Continuously, we also had very close dialogue with startups. So continuously gathering feedback as to what they want so we can actually steer in the right direction. Then of course we tried, like, the notion is that not every single thing in the community should have or should be part of CPH for the Win. But CPH for the Win started out as a hashtag. It's a hashtag where people can communicate via Twitter, and overall we do some activities, but we do some activities to fill out the gaps that are in the ecosystem so that we can be structured. And then we try to support the other things that are taking place, because I think that's also the nature and that's the nature and wilderness of an ecosystem. An ecosystem can't be controlled. An ecosystem can, an ecosystem can be controlled. You can add, for instance, we were talking about a bunch of flowers. You can add water to it and help it grow, but you can't really decide like how long the roses are going to be and where they're going to die off and how many are going to come in. But you can actually help and do yours to increase your chances of the current initiatives getting the visibility that they want. For instance, meetups, conferences, events, so that people can gather around them.
Sure.
And you can actually do yours to support, even though if they need any intros, any connections, and help it grow further. And that's where we try to be like that place where people go if they need an introduction, people go if they need to spread the word about something. And this is what we did when we did the digital platform, where people could go in and really see Copenhagen, the startup scene, all the co-working spaces, all the events, all of that. And then we decided to do a newsletter where we updated everybody every week on all the events, all the latest stories and all that. So it's about creating visibility and not so much controlling it, but supporting all the fantastic things, because there is a recognition that in order, an ecosystem is wild, and all these different, it has to be wild, it's the nature of it. And the only thing you can do is support initiatives and even connect the dots. So, okay, you guys are doing something here, this guy doing something similar, you should talk. Exactly. And trying to kind of facilitate these chances of them growing stronger, growing bigger, and moving Copenhagen in the right direction.
So how do you see that if you took it from the perspective of the individual startup? Now you're starting your own company. So what is kind of the benefit from your startup of being part of a well-functioning ecosystem or well-functioning startup community?
Well, the biggest benefit is that, of course, the network. It's the network which you can utilize in different ways. You can get mentorship, you can get access to investors, you can get access to knowledge by being invited to hosted events or even or even going into being part of various networks, such as the CEO, the CFO, depending on what you are in your position. So definitely network. And then all of that also, I think, secondly, as you grow, also engaging your team and showing that this is not only us sitting here, other people are sitting with the same issues, and really coming together as a family in the ecosystem. Because one of the things we've really been lacking here is actually to see ourselves under one umbrella as being part of an overall family. Because a lot of people actually tend to think that when you're in a local ecosystem, you're competing with each other, but how about just taking it a couple of levels up? We're competing with Southeast Asia, we're competing with America, we're competing with Latin America. So it's about helping each other and learning from each other. I think that's the biggest benefit to the whole ecosystem, because every single one of us have different focuses, have different industries, and are competing with other people for different markets. What we can do here is that we can help each other with the network, with introductions, with learnings and lessons. And then also we can engage our employees in that, so that we actually see ourselves as part of the Copenhagen family. So we can get that really, like, that feeling of being united.
Exactly.
I think that's important.
Exactly. And in my perspective, it's also about kind of at least my idea of building a startup is that it is kind of this iterative process where you basically have your ideas, your assumptions, you need to test them by talking to a lot of people, you need to get a lot of feedback and stuff like that. And being part of the environment, and if you think that, well, building a startup, you need to go through a lot of these iterations and coming from a regional idea to the business model that basically scales at a certain point in time. And then if you're part of that environment, the cost of getting all that feedback through the network, getting the good mentors on board, getting investors to look at your case and stuff like that. So basically your transaction cost in that process is decreasing, because you just kind of sit on a huge pool of knowledge and inputs and stuff like that. So basically, and I've never seen anyone do the calculation, but it's kind of my perception that being part of that actually makes it cheaper to be a startup. You can go further, not in terms that money that you pay to employees is falling. You can just go to Silicon Valley. It's probably a little bit more expensive to get tech guys on board there than compared to Denmark. But basically, all your transaction cost of getting all that type of input that you need into your startup is a little bit cheaper, because it's close by, and people have the willingness to give it to some extent for free. So have you experienced that? So when you're now building your own startup, how do you use the community, or are you using the community at all?
I think that there was, just for fun, I think that when we went out yesterday, I went out with my team. I didn't see them because I got bombarded by people. So that's kind of the luxury problem of being of having the privilege of leading a movement such as that you get to know so many people, and you get to have the ability to help so many people, and that way you get a huge network. So I didn't see my team last night. Okay. Only on the way home when we were stopping by the local for food. But the overall, the biggest advantage has been the network. How do we do it now? We very early in dialogue with people who can help us, and this my experience with CPH has given me an overview of how the process of a startup works. What kind of typical problems do you encounter when you're pre-seed, getting C, Series A? How should we prioritize our time? How should we iterate the product? And what kind of people should we talk to in a very early phase? And having the ability to reach out and book meetings with them.
Absolutely.
And that gives access. So the network, huge advantage, because I'm able to pull out different people that have a lot of knowledge within certain sectors, so we can steer in the right direction. And then even potentially connect my team with certain mentors who are CTOs or CPOs at various places, so that we can really increase the chances of being successful and decrease the chances of actually doing a huge slip somewhere where we shouldn't be.
Okay, fantastic. So Jasenko, thank you very much for coming today.
Thanks.
It's been a pleasure hearing your story about Copenhagen for the win, and hopefully we expect it to grow over the coming years.
Absolutely.
So and very good luck with your new startup.
Thank you.
Thank you.